Good morning, students. We are now going to discuss about the components of ER model in DBMS. The ER model is the base of ER diagram and it represents three main components: entity, attribute, and relation. Entity. The entity is the fundamental item in a data model. A database normally contains different types of entities. Although an entity type has distinct set of attributes, each entity has its own values for each attribute. The entity is a real world thing or real world object which is distinguishable from other objects in the real world. For example, a car is an entity and the model, price, fuel and type are its attributes. There are two types of entities, one is tangible and another one is intangible. The tangible entities are those who exist in real world physically. For example, the person, the car, the book are the tangible entities. The intangible entities are those which exist only logically and have no physical existence. For example, the bank account number, registration number, Aadhaar number, and so on. The second one in ER model is the attribute. The attributes will define some information about its entity. The entity may contain any number of attributes. Among those, one of them will be considered as the primary key attribute, which is unique values. The different types of attribute in the DBMS is simple, composite, single valued, multi-valued, derived, and complex attributes. The attribute which cannot be further subdivided into components are called as simple attributes. For example, the roll number of a student, the ID number of an employee are example of simple attribute. The attribute that can be further split into various components is called composite attribute. For example, the address. The address can be split into flat number, street, city, pin code, and district, so and so. And the attribute which takes up only single value for an entity is called a single valued attribute. For example, the room number of a classroom. The attribute which takes up more than a single value for an entity is called multi-valued entity. For example, the mobile number of a person or a student. A person or student have more than one mobile number, so this will be considered as a multi-valued attribute. The attribute which can be derived from other attribute is called derived attribute. For example, the total average marks of a student and the age of a student are example of derived attributes. In derived attribute, we can derive the total and average by the marks, and we can derive the age by date of birth. And the attributes which can be formed by the nesting of composite and multi-valued attributes are called complex attributes. For example, consider a person having multiple mobile numbers, email, and an address. Here the mobile number, email, are multi-valued attributes and address is the composite attributes. The combination of these two multi-valued attributes and the composite attributes are called complex attributes. The next one is relationship. The relationship in DBMS is primarily the way in which two or more data sets are linked. It is the association between the entities. The relationship are represented by the diamond-shaped symbols with the relationship name inside the diamond. The two sides of diamonds are connected with the entities, and there are some components in relationships. They are number one, degree. The degree of relationship indicates the associated entities. The unary relationship exists when the association maintained with a single entry. In unary relationship, there is only one entity that is related to the relationship. For example, the subject. The subject is the entity and the requires is the relationship. So the relationship between subject and requires is unary relationship. The binary relationship exists when two entities are associated. This relationship consists of two entities and one relationship. For example, the book and publisher are the two entities. They are related with one another. The ternary relationship. The ternary relationship exists when there are three entities are associated. For example, the teacher, the student, and the subject are the three entities, and they are related with teachers. Teacher teaches subject, teacher teaches student, and student teaches subject. These are three ternary relationships. The quaternary relationship exists with four entities that are associated. For example, the teacher, subject, student, and material are the four entities, and they are associated by the relationship studies. Next, the connectivity. The connectivity in relationship can be classified as three types. They are one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. The term connectivity is used to describe the relationship classification. Here, the one-to-one relationship is the manager and department have the relationship managers. The one manager and one department. So this is the one-to-one relationship. Next, one-to-many relationship. Here, the department and employees are one-to-many relationship. One department have multiple number of employees. They are related with relationship has. And the third one is many-to-many relationship. Here, the employees is a entity, and the courses is the entity. These two entities have relationship joins. So employees is more than one and courses is more than one. So this is said to be many-to-many relationships. Next, the cardinality. The cardinality expresses the specific number of entity occurrences associated with one occurrences of related entity. There are two types of cardinality. One is one-to-many relationship, and another one is many-to-many relationship. For example, the company policy does not allow more than 100 employees in a department. So the cardinality rule is department-employee relationship, and it is expressed as one department and have maximum number of 100 employees. So this is said to be one-to-many relationship. Next, the dependency. The entities are classified into strong and weak entity. An entity that exists dependent on some other entity is called weak entity. At the same time, the entity that non-existence dependent on some other entity is called strong entity. Simply, we can say that a dependent entity is a weak entity and the independent entity is a strong entity. The strong entity is independent and weak entity is dependent. The weak entity is also referred to as child dependent or subordinate entities, and the strong entities are as parent, owner, and dominant. Next, the participation. There are two ways an entity can participate in a relationship, that is totally or partially. The participation is also known as mandatory or optional. The participation is mandatory if an entity existence requires existence of an associated entity in a particular relationship. It specifies each entity in an entity set must compulsorily participate in at least one relationship instance in the relationship set. The participation is partial, that is optional, if the occurrence of one entity does not require the occurrence of another corresponding entity in a relationship. It specifies each entity in the entity set may or may not be participate in the relationship instance in that relationship set. And the next one, the one-to-one relationship defines the relationship between the entities employee and the consultant. The one-to-many relationship defines the relationship between employee and department. The employee works for only one department, whereas the department have more than one employee. That is one to many and many to one. The many to many relationship defines relationship between the author and the publisher. The author can have more than one publisher. Likewise, the publisher will publish books of more than one author. It is defined in the below diagram, the one-to-one relationship. And it is the one-to-many relationship. The connector line that have the three connections is called one-to-many relationship. That is defined in diagram. At the same time, the connector which have only one line is called a one-to-one relationship. And this is the many-to-many relationship. It will defined by two arrows in same direction. And the next one is composite entities. The many-to-many relationship in ER model must be broken into one-to-one relationship. This is done by composite entity. The composite entity are represented using a diamond shape within a rectangle. That is defined in the below diagram. In this diagram, the work is the relationship name, which is mentioned in the diamond shape. That diamond shape will be inside the rectangle, so it is called composite entity. This composite entity relationship have two entities, that is author and publisher, and the publisher have some four attributes: author ID, city, country, and name, and the publisher entity have four attributes: publisher ID, city, country, and name. Apart from these things, there are some attributes: author ID, work type, work title, length, and publisher IDs. These are said to be composite entity. And this diagram also refers as the author entity which have four attributes is a one-to-many relationship. Similarly, the publisher entity having some four attributes is a one-to-many relationship. These two one-to-many relationship are combined together, and that is said to be composite entities. Next, the entity list. The database model uses the entities and their attributes and their relationship to construct a representation of real world system. An entity list is a list or collection of entities in the application and their attributes. For example, the book is the entity, and the ISBN number, title, publisher, publication, year, the price are all the attributes of the books. That is also sometimes called as the properties of books. The properties are said to be attributes, and the entities are said to be a product. And the next one is ER diagrams. The ER diagram is shortly called as ERD. It has some symbols and notations, or mainly contains three basic symbols, which are rectangle, oval, and diamond, to represent the relationship between the elements, entities, and attributes. The connector line is used to depict the interconnection of entities, relationship, and their attributes, and they are shown in below figure. And this is the simple ER diagram, and this ER diagram depicts that studying is the relationship, and the student, college is the entity names. In the student entity, there is attributes like SID, S name, S address, and S mobile. In college entity, there is attributes CID, C name, and C department. And the next one is ER modeling symbols. The rectangle which is used for entity, and the double rectangle is used for weak entity, and ellipse is used for attributes, and double ellipse is used for multi-valued attributes. Diamond is used for relationship, and the line is used for connectors. And I hope it will be useful for you. Thank you.